Hi, my name is Sam Led, and welcome to The Fearless Now. This is for you in the nosebleed seats if you're looking for an easier way to approach anxiety, stress, and unhealthy habits from the inside out. There's no techniques and no strategies, so sit back, relax, and let me be your peace of mind Uber driver here on The Fearless Now. Welcome to episode number 2 of the Fearless Now podcast. It's such a pleasure to be here. My name is Sam Led. I'm a transformational coach. And I created this podcast for you in the nosebleed seats, because I just want you to have a better life, have more feel-good feelings, to see the difference between the illusory nature of our thinking and all those thought hurricanes that we all experience. And the more we see thought is made up and how it's creating story from one moment to the next, even if we live in the Shack-Tone Shack or in a mansion in Beverly Hills. I think I just started quoting a David Byrne Talking Head song, right? To all of you that really want to have enlightenment without having to spend 20 or 30 years hanging out with the yogis in India or going to some monastery somewhere fancy or not fancy, that enlightenment is not about having this moment of nirvana. Nirvana is found in the daily moments of our life, but we don't pay attention enough because we are so convinced that our life is being narrated by a supercomputer that is overworked, using an operating system that hasn't had really a software update since the Paleolithic era. Our egoic mind is pulling the strings, but the egoic mind doesn't exist. It's a story that's created. It's a melodrama. And the melodrama is written and directed and produced by your brilliant, perfectly imperfect supercomputer that's doing its best to inform you of the world outside you. But just like any computer, it gets buggy. And when it gets buggy, we go through those thought storms, those thought and thinking hurricanes, anxiety, fear, trepidation, insecurity, low mood. We all deal with it. We all experience it. And the more you see what your mind's doing, the more you will see calm, the more you will drop out, the more you will see that your brain will self-correct on its own. That's why I am here spinning all the great oldies of thought and thinking for you on the Fearless Now podcast. Episode 2, I want to begin with a little story, something that happened to a friend of mine and I this past weekend. We were meeting for lunch. We parked our cars and we were walking across the street to this cute little Mexican restaurant in town. And it was a late Sunday afternoon. There were still people walking around and traffic was not too busy, but there were a lot of cars driving around us. And it's a very narrow street. It's kind of a Tony area of town. It has some really great small eateries. And as we're crossing the street, mind you, the street's very narrow. There's a line of cars waiting to get onto the next street to turn right or go straight onto the freeway. As we're crossing the street, this car speeds up suddenly. This Mercedes speeds up suddenly. And my eyes meet the driver's. I couldn't really make out the driver's face. I couldn't really see. It was the glare of the sun was in my eyes. But somehow my eyes met the driver's. Again, I could not see who the driver was. There were 2 people in the front seat. The driver speeds up and almost hits my friend and I, narrowly avoids us from really doing some damage. I would have been permanent imprint on his very expensive luxury car front end and hood. The first thing that came to mind, and we have all experienced this, especially if we almost get hit by a car, is, holy shit, how dare that driver almost hit me? Who does he think he is? How irresponsible and self-involved is this driver, right? Now, that was the first thing that came to my mind. My friend had the same experience. We bolted towards the car, and it was maybe 30 feet of the car sped up. And the irony is that after the car almost hit us, sped up to a stop sign. So the car had to stop, and it was literally 5 feet from the restaurant we were going to across the street. And as we approached the car, it was a late model Mercedes. The window rolls down automatically, and I see this elderly couple, very elegant looking couple, looking at us and apologizing profusely. Now, initially, I thought it was some, hotshot Beverly Hills, nouveau riche, stuck up person, just being impatient. My egoic mind, the actor in my head, creating this story about what I thought or who I thought was driving the car and how irresponsible the driver was and how negligent and how careless the driver was. That was the screenplay that my supercomputer and my egoic mind was playing very innocently to keep me from harm. But it backfired, right? And we all experience this. The misperception that our egoic mind latches on to a story that is far from true. It's all made up in the moment, and we actually believe it. Thank God the driver rolled the window down and we got to see who was driving the car. It was this elderly couple, this man probably suffering from some cognitive decline, God knows what, apologizing sincerely. And that's a wonderful example of the actor, the egoic actor pulling the strings. We dropped out of our thinking. In that moment, when we saw this elderly couple just trying to get home from probably a weekend, they spent a weekend enjoying themselves, and he just misjudged the pedal travel on his accelerator in his car and sped up too quickly, innocently. Maybe he shouldn't have been driving, but what happened is the thinking that this person was out to get us. This driver was out to hurt us. This driver was irresponsible. All these negative descriptors. I completely fell out of my thinking about how much I wanted to do this driver harm or call the police or make a big to-do about it. I dropped out of my thinking. My friend dropped out of his thinking about the judgment we placed on this driver. And there we were, back in the present moment. The story stopped. We ripped the script up and just walked quietly to the restaurant and had a wonderful lunch. That is the actor versus our self-correcting mind that corrects itself automatically. No matter how heavy our thinking is, no matter how insecure our thinking is, it will always self-correct. That we are not our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. We are not the psychology of our thinking, but we've been conditioned to think that that is who we are. That my friend and I finally dropped out of our thinking about how much we wanted to scream and yell at this poor elderly couple. Thankfully, we didn't. We got really calm. We got really present. Now, what part of that is habitual thinking about how to respond to someone that almost tries to run us over versus our true nature, who we are as divine humans that are not our thinking and our psychology? That what we think is truth in the moment, but that truth changes. That the river of thought and thinking always changes. That we always drop out of our thinking, that we always drop out of this thought storm, this maelstrom of heavy thinking, regardless if we do techniques or not, regardless if we learn behavioral conditioning or cognitive behavioral therapy, which has some great short-term benefits to some people. But it's not a long-term solution because it's built into us. It's who we are, that our brain self-corrects if we allow it to. When we don't fill it with additional techniques and protocols, try to get the mind to be quiet, to stop it from being impulsive or to stop it from doing things that are harmful to us. That the present moment, when we drop out of this catastrophe of thinking, Exhibit A, how my mind went from zero to hyperadrenaline very innocently, justifiably, innocently trying to protect me and my friend's brain trying to protect him. But the story was so wrong and incorrect. Even if it was a careless driver, even if it was some hotshot in a Mercedes, right? What would it matter? What if we just dropped out of our thinking naturally when we saw our mind start racing, our thinking just latching on to some cockamamie story? We don't have ownership of our thinking. It just flows through us. And when we see we don't have ownership of our current thought turbulence, Exhibit A, me freaking out, almost losing my shit because of a silly misunderstanding with the car. Once we see that more, we then see that we don't have to use our free will in that way, that we are not our thinking, that we don't have ownership of our thoughts, that the present moment is not anxiety ridden, that we have anxiety thinking, that the floppy disk has been inserted. I call it a floppy disk because I am Gen Xer. Let me fast forward that the program, the app that you're installing of anxiety ridden thinking is not the present moment. That's a program. You have a supercomputer that's already hired the actors, the ego, to play that role, right? That your supercomputer, your personal mind is using the tools of the trade called blame, judgment, and criticism to create a story to keep you safe. But that's where the error is. That your mind doesn't know better innocently. The psychological innocence that we all experience when we freak out, it's an error in judgment because we are just trying to keep ourselves safe, but innocently doing it when there's no need to do it. And if my friend and I actually overreacted and just say the driver was a pompous idiot that just really was impatient and had no regard for my friend and I crossing the street, just say what if it was the person we thought it was and we were wrong and we did start yelling and screaming. Obviously, it wouldn't have been the right thing to do. It would have caused more drama. But the right thing to do at that moment just felt like that in the moment. But if we gave it time after the incident, we would see that we were just caught up in a program, inadvertently inserted into our hard drive of anger and of being pissed off. And the biggest part of that is, and with this understanding is, yes, sometimes that does happen. Sometimes we do have road rage. Sometimes we do get caught up and fly off the handle. We're caught around the axle of our own angry, momentary, and very transitory thinking. Once we see that that's a thought program, once we see that we overreacted, and if we did overreact, we've all been there. The more we see our bad moments of disclarity, of bad behavior, the more we see our thinking going off the handle, the more we can also see that we do have freedom of choice to not go down that road, that our thinking is not who we are. We are not our thinking. We are not our psychology. It's the human experience is multifaceted. Who we are at our default setting is well-being and calm. Who we are is resilient. Who we are is unequivocally perfectly imperfect. But sometimes we just get wrapped around the axle. And the learning lesson for my friend and I is that when we see those wheels turning in our head, when we see the machinery of our thinking going haywire, it's not who we are. It's not the person driving the school bus per se. That's a rogue driver that gets behind the wheel sometimes. But the more we see the rogue driver is not who we are, the more we can not put in that disc, not put in that program, that app to download into our hard drive and just have more self-awareness there. But what if we can just question those moments? What if it's sometimes possible just to question our behavior and just say, that's not me? What if I'm able to see that as just part of our evolutionary, misguided and buggy neuromachinery just doing its best to keep us safe? And sometimes it manifests as road rage or screaming and yelling. And we know that doesn't lead to anything good. God forbid if it was my friend got hit or I got hit by the car, screaming and yelling wouldn't be out of the question. And that's a normal reactionary thing. We all go there sometimes, but you don't have to be Buddha. You don't have to be walking around in moments of Zen all day long to see our buggy, busy, heavy, noisy thinking. It's just part of the programs, the conditioning that we've inadvertently have installed into our cortex, into our brain, whether we are conscious of it or not. And it doesn't take a deep exploration to see that. It is so much work. It's so much added work to excavate that, to find out why. And I'm not judging any of those people that do years and years of therapy and behavioral techniques to try to stop or fix or squelch unsavory behaviors. And that works for a lot of people temporarily, but we always return back to thought. Always. The biggest takeaway from this is that when you see your unsavory behavior, when you see thinking gone awry, A, you don't beat yourself up or judge yourself, and B, you see it and realize it's all made up. And when you see it's all made up, when you see it's illusory, when you see it's not real, it's just a big, heavy cumulonimbus cloud of thought thunderstorms moving through that your conditioned mind is wrapping a hold of and telling you is truth. It doesn't totally captivate your attention. It goes into the background instead of the foreground. It doesn't completely overrun your default state, which is intuition and understanding and humility and calm. All the great gurus understand that. All the great gurus, a lot of it's luck, and they get into this position of members of the cloth, erudite and holy members of the cloth. They get into this position because they kind of see how the human mind works. Sid Banks certainly did. The Maharishi, and they're all mortal and they're all flawed as human beings. But underneath that human machinery is a divine, spiritual, wonderful, and perfect being. And when we can see the noise more often of our imperfect human machine, it doesn't become such a big deal anymore. It doesn't completely captivate us. It does not take a hold of us as much. You talk to folks in recovery that have fallen off the wagon, recovery from drugs and alcohol, and I've worked with folks in recovery from drugs and alcohol. They'll have falling off the wagon moments, but those moments get smaller and smaller, not because of the 12-step program. It's because when they see how silly their thinking is when they want to grab a drink, when they have a moment where they think they feel like, there's a moment of weakness. They had a bad day at work, or someone hurt their feelings, or fill in the blank. Someone cut them off on the freeway and they're really seething and they're angry and they're feeling helpless. The loss of income. The go-to, which would be in the past, which would be going for that drink or going for that marijuana or going for pick your drug of choice. Those moments become diminished once people that see it, they know that that's part of the game, the machinery of the brain's playing. And you don't have to play the game. You don't have to play the game. It's not Monopoly. It's not chess. It's just a silly game the brain plays because all it is a computer. What you put into it, you get out. And if you have been around drugs and alcohol your whole life, it's sometimes a challenge. And there are moments when we have weakness around that if you've been around drugs and alcohol your life. But when you realize that it's not a game that you're going to win because the machinery of thinking is just repeating an old program, it's kind of like a record that's stuck. You're playing the same groove over and over again. Those of you that know what records are, that's kind of how thinking works. And it's frustrating and it's challenging. And we think we're broken and we think we need to fix it. But at the end of the day, it fixes itself. At the end of the day, no matter how heavy and how uncomfortable and how painful the thinking is, you get back down a baseline either way. You get back down either way. The more we see understanding, humility within ourselves and with our fellow human beings, the more self-awareness we see within ourselves. And we see that muscle, that self-awareness muscle. It's a really big muscle that has always been there. We'll see it more. And it's a gift we all possess. It really is. Even in the most harrowing moments that feel unimaginable, untenable, and excruciatingly painful. When I started to really both teach this understanding and share it with clients and with my friends, and been doing videos on Instagram and Facebook about the understanding, the 3 principles. It's a hard pill to swallow because the pill is our egoic mind trying to create meaning out of something that you can't create meaning from because it's already there. It's this space As Michael Neal, one of my favorite coaches and authors in personal development and also in the three principles world, calls it, it's that space before thinking. And it's also that space once thoughts settle. The more we see our own psychological innocence and the more we see it in our fellow human beings. And it's a beautiful thing. Once you see that the egoic actor and the illusion that you think is pulling the strings in your human experience, in your day to day, very human experience, you'll see that this egoic actor has no point of reference and does not exist. And you will also see that a personal mind has no frame of reference at all. And it's very innocently pulling these old tapes of fear. I call them Maxell tapes because I grew up with a lot of this Case Logic case of 4,000 tapes growing up. I still love making mixtapes, even though it's on Spotify. I cheat. I still have my tape deck somewhere, but it takes too long in this instant gratification world. But your personal mind really knows how to kind of access those old memories, those old Maxell tapes of fear, anxiety, and trauma to predict future fantasies. And that's what my brain did during this very innocent, very human moment between me, the actor in my head, pulling the strings of my experience that I got caught up in and actually started believing. But the more you see how mind works, the more you see it's made up. The more that you see what is real and what is a story being concocted about the people and the things going on in your life, the more you're going to really see what's real and what's illusory. And, we all fall off the horse. Even seasoned transformational coaches that practice 3Ps, even Sid Banks, who's an estimated middle-class prophet who had this wonderful discovery that our thinking's all made up, just like Buddha or Jesus or Muhammad or Moses, or name your favorite prophet. They saw it. They saw it. That the experience, the human experience of thought and thinking, it's all made up in the moment. That if you took away thinking and thought, all you'd be looking at is nothing. You wouldn't know how to address your parents. You wouldn't know what your car was. You wouldn't know what this very bright orange t-shirt I'm wearing is. It's a gift, but the gift also has an asterisk next to it. I don't know if they still have it on mirrors. I think they still, like back in the day, your side view mirror would say objects in the mirror appear closer than they seem to be. Well, that's kind of how thinking works, that it does the best job it can to inform you of your world. But just know it's a perfectly imperfect supercomputer modulating different organ systems, but doesn't know shit when it comes to intuition. It doesn't know shit when it comes to our true nature of who we are, which is well-being and calm. And once we see that, the less you have to push it out of the way. When we're really caught up, when we're really insecure, when we have something bad happen to us or someone dies or we have a health crisis and we're really so caught up in our thinking about how unsurvivable it is or how terrible it is. The less you push with behavioral strategies, the more you see your experience for what it is, that it moves through us, that it's not fixed, and that our mind, just like a buggy operating system, you download a patch or you download a fix or you download a new update to your smartphone. That's what the brain does. It's absolutely brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And then that old thinking washes away. The trick is not to beat yourself up when it happens again, because we all get caught up in the machinery of our bullshit thinking, fear, anxiety. I mean, I still have panic. I still have anxiety sometimes. It's not as debilitating. I don't think it's that big a deal, although it does rattle me sometimes. And if it does rattle me a lot, I just let it pass through me, even though it's very uncomfortable. And once you start doing that, when you see that the mind works like weather, like it's just like how weather and thunderstorms and blizzards move through an area like where you live. If you have bad weather in the wintertime, once that storm passes through, it's sunny again. The same thing with thought and thinking. And life gets so much easier once you start to see that. Once you start to see that your true nature is to experience life and enjoy it. Even if you're not rich, even if you're in debt, even if you're not completely healthy, even if you have problems like we all do. Life gets so much easier when you just stay in the moment. Stay in the moment with me while you're listening to this podcast. Well, thank you so much for listening to episode 2 of The Fearless Now. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you in episode 3. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please let me know. You can subscribe to this podcast and leave a review so that others, that really need it. Maybe you have friends that are really struggling right now, struggling to see their own well-being, struggling to see their own wonderful and capable, resilient self. Please subscribe and please leave a review so that your friends, your family members, or your colleagues can find their way here. The more you subscribe or you get people to subscribe, the more people can use this as a tool to make their life and just happier and easier. You can also go to my website. It's www.samledconsulting.com and sign up for my free video on how to calm down early morning anxiety and negative head chatter. Thank you so much again. It is a complete honor and a privilege to be here for all of you. And if I've accomplished my goal today during this podcast, just maybe you feel a little bit lighter. You feel a little bit shinier. I don't know. It's better than feeling shitty because that feeling is not who you are. Who you are is kindness. Who you are is silly. Who you are is capable. Who you are is love. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. See you for episode number 3 on The Fearless Now.